The meme coin's value hit a peak of $75.35 on January 19th.
But that doesn't mean anything.
And that's before your inauguration, and then it surged.
Look, I'm in favor of crypto.
He's in favor of crypto. And I don't think that anyone's going to be on the other side of that saying that he's not in favor of crypto. The question is he in favor of crypto for everybody? Or is he in favor of crypto for himself? And I think increasingly we are seeing the latter play true. Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Coinage. Happy Monday. I'm your host, Zach Guzman, coming to you live from our Brooklyn studios in New York City, back from a week in Dubai. It was pretty crazy over there for Token, for Sui Basecamp, which I was emceeing, for a lot of things. And if I didn't see you out there, goddamn shame. But we are here to recap everything that happened, not just over in Dubai, but also back here in the States, as well as everything else happening here in crypto, to recap quite a bit of action. If you are wondering what the hell's going on right now, you're in the right place, because that's exactly what Coinage is here to do for you, as the only community-owned show in crypto, to break this all down and give you a chance to own what we're building as well, alongside the co-founder of Netflix, myself, and 7,000 other smart people in crypto who own a Coinage NFT. If you haven't yet, head to coinage.media to learn a little bit more about us. But want to bring up the charts we're looking at right now as Bitcoin dips below 94K. We were sitting pretty just a few days ago, north of 97K. Things were looking pretty good there. But some headlines to dig into around this price action, as we are now below that 94K level. Things look a little bit shakier for ETH, surprise, surprise. But we'll dig into why an upgrade coming this week could potentially turn that around. Hold on to your seats for that one, ladies and gents, as well as some other headlines to dig into as well. Texas, I think we have a rundown here. Sailor buying the dip. That one's not too surprising. But we were down in D.C. before we went to Dubai. We're going to talk about what we learned from Hester Peirce. It's always on this side. From Hester Peirce down in D.C. in a discussion not just about what we're building, but about ownership here in the U.S. and why I think we're finally turning the corner when it comes to real ownership in crypto, which personally I'm quite excited about. And then again, we'll dig into maybe the other side of that, which she told us in our interview, still can't do fraud. And we're going to hear the final sentencing for one of the biggest fraud cases outside of Do Kwon, outside of SBF. Celsius's founder, Alex Mashinsky, getting sentenced this week as well. So we're going to dig into all that. But let's first start with why I think we're seeing Bitcoin dip below that 94,000 level. And if you looked at it over the weekend, there were some big headlines, perhaps none other to explain, Texas, this chart move here, than a few things to dig into as we look at it one more time. I want to bring up this headline here because it was something that a lot of Bitcoiners and a lot of crypto people were discussing on X over the weekend. And that was that Arizona's governor vetoed their state bill that would have seen investments into Bitcoin from the state pension funds, investment funds, first state in the U.S. that would have greenlit this if the governor did sign that bill. Senate Bill 1025, dead, as the governor there, Democratic governor, vetoed it. Now, you could say, Zach, why is that such a big deal? And, it is and it isn't, because at the federal level, we've seen, this battle between everybody to try and figure out what is going to happen in terms of Trump's big push to make the U.S. the crypto capital of the world, and whether or not that strategic reserve will get greenlit by using the country's Bitcoin holdings to kind of create a quasi Bitcoin reserve, not necessarily what Senator Lummis wants to do, which is buy millions and millions of dollars of new Bitcoin. But what we did see was the governor vetoing this bill, partially because she doesn't think that the technology or Bitcoin standing is far enough along to warrant something like that. Now, it's an interesting decision. And if you take her at her word, obviously there are a lot of people in crypto that would disagree, including Pomp, who we've had on the show before. His tweet kind of bringing up the fact that no politician should know whether or not, Bitcoin is a good investment or not. And so doing something like this seems at odds. At the same time, there were some other people pointing out that, a lot of other non-state funds, including other retirement funds from public workers, have already exposed themselves to monster shares. So they are, at least through that, exposed to Bitcoin. So kind of, somewhat of a weird thing to see the state and their governor block this. But I don't think that happened in a vacuum. I think a lot of people need to wake up to the fact that politics, particularly right now, matter a shit ton. And that is a technical term. Because, and we were just down in DC, we're going to dig into what we learned, but it does matter a lot, particularly if you think about Trump's big push to make the U.S. crypto capital of the world. There is going to be a counter movement, as there always is, between Republicans and Democrats around this. And if that's what he wants, you better believe that Democrats are going to swing to the other side to make sure that doesn't happen. And a new report from Politico exposing exactly that going on behind the scenes right now, as that key stablecoin bill we've covered before looks to be on shaky ground. This report from Politico, text, I think we can bring this up if you can see my screen here. We've got new reporting from DC saying that the Democrats that were on board with that stablecoin bill just a few weeks ago, now saying they are no longer going to vote for it. And you have that fight brewing as to why that is the case. Why all of a sudden would this U-turn be happening? And pretty interesting to see kind of some of those senators, in these talks coming out and saying, hold on now, this isn't exactly true that this is a reversal somewhere out of nowhere. And you got Ruben Gallego, Arizona senator, looky. Apparently all the big crypto stuff is going down in Arizona. And he came out and kind of tried to respond to that Politico story, and he was quoted in there as well, saying that, look, this didn't come out of nowhere. Basically, Republicans walked back all the improvements that we just went through to get this to a spot where a lot of Democrats were on board. And also interesting to see other reporting come out and say Chuck Schumer and guess who, Elizabeth Warren, out there to say that Democrats should not be voting for this bill, not supporting this bill, particularly at a time when it would give a big boost to Tether and other stablecoin issuers. What kind of stablecoin issuers aside from Tether, perhaps you might ask? Well, that is where I think the world is now waking up to the fact that Trump and his family have been leading the charge quietly, somewhat quietly, on his USD1 stablecoin, which we have covered, of course, here at Coinage many a time. If you haven't checked out our deep dive, you might want to go do that because it helps you wrap your brain around what I think has become a pretty big, important issue for crypto to realize, which is if the president and his family are profiting as much as they are off of their own stablecoin and printing their own digital dollar, of course, you're not going to have Democrats be stoked about some of these changes they're trying to impose. And so you got to look at yourselves in the mirror, I think, as a pro-crypto American, which I would put myself in that camp. I don't think you're going to have a decision not have any consequences, certainly not in a world where America is so split 50-50. If Trump is making money, Democrats are going to be extremely opposed to supporting any sort of pro-crypto movement, particularly a stablecoin bill, which will give free rein for Trump and his family to continue printing cash. And so this does not, to me, look at all unexpected. And you really got to ask yourselves, if you are, particularly a pro-Trump crypto fan, is he skimming off the top here? Is it kind of selling out the goodwill that would be going towards crypto if he and his family weren't potentially going to be making billions of dollars off of USD1, their own stablecoin? Could that goodwill have been won? Could we have already seen the stablecoin bill in DC approved by now? So I think some of this is mixed. Some of this is certainly related. And if you watch this Sunday on Meet the Press, as President Trump was asked about crypto, which kind of surprising to see exactly how much of that interview was filled with crypto questions. Just want to play a little bit of what we heard. I think we have two from this one. I want to start with the back and forth between, it's the longer clip, the back and forth between the host of Meet the Press and President Trump, because, if you're in crypto, it's going to look funny to you, but very interesting to see, again, so many people focusing on the meme coin, and President Trump basically saying, look, I don't know what the hell's going on with the meme coin. You can see whether or not you believe it. Let's just play that clip from Meet the Press. Take a listen.
You've branded your own cryptocurrency. The coin's values actually surged recently after you announced that top holders would be invited to have dinner.
I don't even know that. What did it surge to?
What did it surge to?
Yeah, what's it worth? You might as well tell me, because I have no idea.
Well, it surged. I will find it. Hold on one second. 5.2 or 58%. So 58%.
To what number?
That's not bad. 14.32.
What? Billion?
No, dollars per cryptocurrency.
$billion dollars?
No.
What's the number? I mean, what is the amount?
The meme coin's value hit a peak of 75.35 on January 19th.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything.
And that's before your inauguration, and then it surged.
Look, I'm in favor of crypto.
Okay.
He's in favor of crypto. And I don't think that anyone's going to be on the other side of that saying that he's not in favor of crypto. The question is he in favor of crypto for everybody? Or is he in favor of crypto for himself? And I think increasingly we are seeing the latter play true, particularly when you have to ask, again, where would we be if he didn't have his own crypto project? If World Liberty Financial was not launched, could we have actually seen a world in which Democrats and Republicans would have agreed long ago that this was generally net good for everybody? And now, as you have the president push his own stablecoin, the other big news, and this links back to why and what we saw play out in Dubai, was that they announced a deal, an investment particularly, where you saw USD1 used in a deal, particularly one between Binance and an investment firm from an Emirati-backed investment. And the reason why that matters is because if that's what's happening, and you're going to see a big boost in adoption for USD1, it again directly benefits Trump and his family. And so we've talked about the ethical concerns around this before, but let's just put the ethical concerns aside. Let's talk about what people who watch Coinage care about, which is their own bags. No harm, no foul. But if your own bags are going to suffer because President Trump is putting the dealings of USD1 ahead of your bags, as pro-crypto voters, I don't see how anyone could be stoked about that. And that's my main point is, put aside what you think about Trump. Let's just talk about your own goddamn bags here, ladies and gents. And if Democrats are going to be more focused on headlines like this, which is Trump family tapping $2 billion to go towards USD1, then it doesn't really matter about all the other stuff if we're just talking about pro-crypto moves. Let's just, this is a nice Defender ad, by the way. Shout out to that car. It looks lovely. But, I mean, I think that this is pretty important to talk about because it's, again, I think something that mainstream media is waking up to, maybe not as evidenced by the clip we just played on Meet the Press. At least they're asking about it. Maybe not the right questions, certainly not the questions we would ask in an interview like that. However, you do have Trump continuing to defend that he's pro-crypto in the other piece of that Meet the Press clip or interview. Just want to play a little bit more of what he tried to say in defense of some of that. Take a listen to President Trump.
I want crypto. I think crypto is important because if we don't do it, China's going to. Mm-hmm. And it's new. Mm-hmm. It's very popular, very hot. If you look at the market, when the market went down, that stayed much stronger than other aspects of the market. But I want crypto because a lot of people, millions of people want it. I don't know if you know that Biden went after it violently, and then before the election, he changed his tune entirely. His head of the SEC, everybody changed their tune. You know why? Because there were hundreds of millions of people that are participating in crypto, and they wanted to get their votes.
So that may be true, but again, I ask if any of this will start to impact any of the votes that Trump got among pro-crypto people because of what we're seeing play out. And so I think the stablecoin updates are going to be fairly important to watch over these next few weeks, and certainly I think a large part as to why we are seeing some of the moves we've seen since that announcement in Dubai from Eric Trump, and then following the veto from Arizona's governor, and then following the stablecoin updates in DC. I do not think that these are completely unlinked. I've just linked them for you. You can disagree, but you'd be wrong. All right, let's move on to what else we have in the rundown. And that, of course, being the man who doesn't care about politics whatsoever, or what the hell's happening in DC, a man who just likes to buy Bitcoin as if it's his own personal kind of pastime, which I think a lot of people who watch this show also enjoy that it is. Michael Saylor scooping up and buying more Bitcoin over the weekend. $183 million this time at a net average price of $95K. So if you wanted to buy right now, you'd be buying at a lower price than Michael Saylor just bought. And now, more than $38 billion strategy holds in Bitcoin. Continuing to see this chart in terms of Saylor Tracker climb So a lot of money, a lot of Bitcoin, and Michael Saylor continuing to lead the charge there. And again, we bring this up mostly just because if we are to see what a lot of people are talking about start to play out, that's a lot of gunpowder and a lot of leverage as we're seeing it set up for what could be a big Bitcoin move. Let's just say what we just talked about in the first segment of the show gets cleared. Then you got a huge kind of push and swing back to the upside, particularly at a time that Saylor has now continued to be able to do this. And if you look at kind of where the options markets are pricing things, they are pricing in a bit of a swing now. And if you're paying attention to any of that, there's some pretty big interest in the 300K out of the money calls right now. Basically, people trying to lever up on options for the rest of the year for where Bitcoin's price eventually goes, betting that it will hit 300K. But as we've seen from Michael Saylor and Strategy continuing to issue debt and equity along to capture the volatility of the ups and downs, still a lot of firepower here. And if it moves to the north, that unlocks even more firepower that Saylor can then raise against to buy more Bitcoin. And so everything's still kind of setting up. And on the ground in Dubai, that was very much, Raoul Pal gave a great speech, CEO of Real Vision. I'm going to be going on Real Vision to talk about what we're doing here on Coinage tomorrow. But great speech from him around if you believe that some of what we've seen in the last month was overdone and that the economy is still on good footing, and that even if it's not, the government might need to print more money, Bitcoin's sitting in a great spot to rebound from here. And certainly the options markets are pricing in some of that volatility. So I'm just saying, Saylor's still buying the dips, and if things should move to the upside, the gunpowder's still there for him to continue doing exactly this in a way that will be even larger. And all you really need is one catalyst, which could be either the stablecoin bill, which again, maybe some water on that hope, cold water on that hope. But outside of the stablecoin bill, again, updates outside of that could be governments, could be the state race, by the way. Don't want to overlook this. This is important because as much as I just said about Arizona having their governor deny that one, wouldn't it be somewhat fitting, don't you think, Texas, if we saw New Hampshire, of all states, granted they might not be the largest, but the live free or die state? Look at this. Look at this list. We had Arizona. They were in the lead. Their governor shot that one in the face. Not happening there. But right behind them, you got New Hampshire, the live free or die state, with their own state bill, 302, potentially greenlighting the first state in the union to come through here and greenlight a state investment into Bitcoin. And I think that'd be kind of fitting. Live free or die state. Actually, that's better. You could sell that way better than just Arizona doing this, I think, personally. So I don't know. I think that that's another interesting one to watch. And outside of New Hampshire, you got North Carolina, you got Texas, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, also in the mix. Could be anyone's game. But I think a lot of people are watching the state-by-state race since at the federal level, not a lot of action on the Bitcoin reserve happening there. But anyways, I'm done talking politics, I think, for this show. But wait, not really, because we were just down in D.C., so we have to talk a little bit more about politics. This less so, though. This is more about the SEC and what's been going on there. I think we have the photo of me and Commissioner Peirce. Hester Peirce, the new head of the crypto task force. There we are on the 10th floor of the SEC building. We went in there, and not a lot of people have done interviews on the 10th floor of the SEC building, as it turns out. And as we learned from her in this interview that we'll probably be sharing this week, we learned, too, that not too many people actually have ever gone into a crypto task force meeting, as we did, and then turned around and interviewed a sitting SEC commissioner. And yet, that is exactly what the Coinage community and myself did. So shout out to Texas and Clark, our two producer extraordinaires who came down with us. It was a hell of a trip. And I think the cool thing about it was that, again, we weren't just doing the interview, but we were actually talking about what we're trying to do as a DAO co-op based here in the US, which for me personally was kind of one of the coolest things to do that day. And the meeting was great. I think it was the opening door, first opening salvo in terms of some of these things that never had really happened in the US because so many crypto companies were scared. So many crypto companies didn't want to go in and chat with Gary Gensler because their actions spoke louder than their actual words in saying that, yeah, no, everything's going to be fine. And then they sued damn near everybody. And so Commissioner Peirce Thank you to her for her time, but more importantly, thank you to her for establishing the crypto task force and turning kind of some of the momentum shifts in DC to go from, hey, we're going to sue everybody, to, hey, we want to work with you. Please come in and talk. It's been really cool to kind of look at, and they publicly post these things. They posted information from our meeting on their site to kind of show exactly what we were trying to talk about, which is create a roadmap for what we've done here at Coinage in the US for other people to recreate what we've been able to do, building an on-chain cooperative where people can buy our NFTs and join our DAO co-op and tell us what to cover, which guests to have on, and vote on governance issues in a one-member, one-vote fashion, by the way. It's important to point that out. So anyways, just wanted to tease that a little bit because we got some great alpha from her in terms of kind of how you're navigating all this and why it doesn't necessarily need to be the case that the only way to get some of the clarity on this is through Congress, sitting at a kind of a weird spot for her where it's who wants to lead, who wants to take the baton and run with it. Is it always going to be the crypto task force? Should it always be the crypto task force? So we get into all that. That interview will be coming out on Coinage this week as well. There's a lot happening this week, though, ladies and gents, because not only do we have that interview coming out, but we also have, as she said in our interview, a reminder, even though she's saying most things in crypto are kosher now, one thing that is not and never will be kosher is fraud. She made that pretty clear in our interviews, don't do fraud. And I think this week we're getting a permanent and pretty strong reminder of that. The question is, how strong of a reminder will it be, as Celsius founder Alex Mashinsky is sentenced on the 8th, just a few days from now. I think the maximum sentence could be something like 20 years. Don't quote me on that. I haven't looked it up. Maybe I should, and maybe I will right now when we play a clip, because it wasn't too long ago that I interviewed Alex Mashinsky on Yahoo Finance, asking him exactly how he should respond to a lot of what I discovered back then, which was that it sounded like he was taking in customer deposits and taking out loans against them, which a lot of people didn't know, and basically lied to me on air about all that, which in retrospect, no good. You do not want to lie to me. Fair warning to everybody, because I take that shit personally, and I have in the past. But I want to play a little bit of that moment on air back, and I think that was, 2022, 21? Probably 21. Because I think we're going to learn a lot about where the DOJ currently is. And of course, again, this is a sentencing, so it's not exactly the DOJ running the ship on this. But it will be interesting to see exactly where he lands after pleading guilty. Keep in mind, SBF did not plead guilty. He pled not guilty, and then we saw that trial play out. For Mashinsky, he went a different route, eventually pled guilty to certain charges that were brought against him. And so big question marks in terms of, if someone goes that route, how many years is he going to get? So let's just play. When I asked him about some of those terms of service way back when, here's what he told me then. Very different now. How do you kind of calculate and assure customers that things are safe if it's maybe not regulated the same way that banks are?
Well, so again, banks are allowed to create up to 50-to-1 leverage. So for every dollar that they have, some of the largest banks in the world issue $50 worth of loans. Celsius, like I said, is always less than $1 worth of loans for every dollar that we have in deposits, because we're not a bank. So all this discussion that we're talking about is in the context of Celsius having less than 1-to-1 ratio, while banks, who are the people who basically funding here or creating fear, uncertainty, and doubt, are the ones who leverage 20, 30, 40 times to 1, and are the ones we have to bail out every 10.
I don't know what's going on with our clips these days, but they're always like a little bit shorter maybe than I remember them being. But that was Mashinsky talking about banks, and obviously, the irony there is, went down, took a lot of people's deposits with them. So I don't know necessarily how much better all of these things were than banks, but nonetheless, it was indeed the fact that it is 20 years that the prosecutors are pushing for in terms of max sentencing or sentencing guidelines that they are expecting the judge to fit into. But we'll learn. I'm going to go to that one because these are always fun to go to. So I'll be there in person per usual on the 8th. We'll bring that news to you at Coinage, coinage.media, where all the big headlines in crypto land, whether they want to or not. The truth hurts sometimes, and the truth shall set you free. And that is what we do here at Coinage. The last story to highlight on the show today is what's happening with ETH, and increasingly, actually, from some pretty smart people, including Fundstrat Sean Farrell, a Coinage NFT holder along with moi, has been talking about some of the moves in ETH. In Texas, I can bring this chart up, or you can, I think. But looking at ETH BTC, that ratio, it's been obviously down for a really long time. But as CoinDesk was highlighting in this chart, so shout out CoinDesk for letting us borrow this one. Bollinger Bands, the volatility here in that ratio has basically, it's just been trading sideways. And that generally happens, as Sean Farrell recently wrote in a Fundstrat note, that generally happens before you see a swing to the upside. And, you know, sitting here at what, 1800-ish? You know, way lower, seen a huge decline since Eric Trump said it was a good time to buy. Off, I think, about 50% since he said that. But a lot of smart people are basically saying the same thing here, which is that trading sideways for this long can only mean that ETH could be going higher. And I think the piece that I would include in that calculus, not to be overlooked because I'm a fundamentals type of guy, you're going to tell me that. I'm going to need a reason as to why that might be the case. What could be the trigger? There is a trigger coming up for Ethereum this week that I want to bring up to highlight here, which is another upgrade. And we've seen this before. This does usually do something. Maybe it's not immediate, at least in the past, when we've seen Ethereum upgrades pushed live. But the next one up is Pectra, coming for May 7th. At least that's when we are expecting this to happen. And so if that hits on May 7th, essentially, just to, you know, distill it down, is that it'll make a lot of what some of those other improvements that were made before, it'd make them a lot more efficient. You might say, Zach, what does that actually mean? Well, I mean, like when we're talking about Ethereum's main strategy to make Ethereum more efficient, yeah, we're talking blobs, we're talking layer 2 networks, we're talking all the data in these transactions rolling up in a more efficient way. So one of the things that this new upgrade will bring is the number of blob data units per block is going to raise from 3 to 6, allowing for a maximum of 9. You might say, Zach, what the hell does that mean? And I would say it begins to make things slightly more efficient at a time when I think a lot of traditional finance is waking up to try and find which chain is going to offer them the best trade-offs in some of these things. A lot of people had assumed, just based on price action, what we've seen play out, that it was a bit of a no-brainer, that it's obviously going to be Solana. But this upgrade might come at a perfect time to where people are maybe asking those questions. And so anytime you have an upgrade making things more efficient, could actually nudge the needle back in ETH's direction. And I mean, maybe we close the show the same way that we opened it. We talked so much about World Liberty Financial. It's worth noting that a lot of what World Liberty Financial has been cooking up is essentially on Ethereum, mostly. I think like 92% of what they offer is built around the ETH ecosystem. And maybe BNB, because CZ's in the mix. And so maybe not the case, at least if you take that at face value, that it's all Solana, kind of take it or leave it. And so I think pretty interesting to kind of put these pieces together. Of course, we'll see how it all plays out, but I'm just putting that out there, floating it for you to consider. We have seen from a few analysts in our network, again, not pumping our own bags here, but interesting to see some of that shape up around ETH in somewhat of a tough chart that we've always highlighted, that ETH to BTC ratio been real tough for the last, 4 years or so. So could it potentially be turning around? I don't know. We've made that call before and it has not. And so don't want to do that again. But that was right before the entire market melted down. So a little bit there. Trump tariffs, more to play there than anything ETH or BTC related. But regardless, that will wrap up our usual Monday show. It's been a while since we did this, so thank you for joining us again on Coinage. Per usual, we do these 3 times a week, Mondays usually, Wednesdays and Thursdays as well. But a lot of news coming up. So the best way to stay on top of everything, if you're not already, follow us on X, subscribe on YouTube, and of course, hit up our Substack there for our free newsletter delivered once a week, every week, the top headlines in crypto and what to watch for. And if you haven't yet, consider joining our community to co-own this project as well with me and the co-founder of Netflix. And that'll do it for us. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again soon.